Welcome back. The U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a large-scale attack on Venezuela. The capital, Caracas, was hit by several explosions earlier this morning. A military complex in the city has reportedly been set alight. Trump said on his social media platform that he also captured President Nicolas Maduro and has flown him out of the country.
Venezuela's government has not confirmed this. Earlier this morning, Maduro declared a state of emergency, calling America's action a serious military aggression. Tensions have increased between the two nations in recent weeks after Trump deployed a Navy task force to the Caribbean. It's been attacking vessels at sea allegedly involved in trafficking drugs. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Simon Marks joins us from London. Simon, happy 2026. Thanks for your time. Now, what specifically has been independently confirmed by the Pentagon or White House beyond Trump's post? Strike locations, units involved, and whether Maduro is actually in custody?
Well, Hugo, it is a new year. It is very much a new year in Latin America, with President Trump making good on his threat to launch ground assaults on Caracas. We've had absolutely no confirmation whatsoever of the president's claim that Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Venezuela's First Lady, are both in U.S. custody and have been flown out of the country. The president says that he will be addressing the American people at 11 o'clock in the morning, U.S. time on the East Coast. That will be at, I think, around 6 p.m. South Africa time. And it may well be that he wants to announce all of the details of this extraordinary, pugnacious, aggressive military assault on Venezuela. We know that airstrikes were launched on several sites. Many residents in the capital, Caracas, say that they believe those sites were specifically targeted, although we do not know exactly what sites were coming under U.S. attack. Meanwhile, American helicopters appear to have landed and forced President Maduro and his wife not only to give up power, but forced them on board those planes. The president says, on those helicopters, the president says this was all done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. And remember that Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, has been a wanted man in the United States for the last 5 years. He's wanted on narco-terrorism charges in federal court in New York. And indeed, just a matter of weeks ago, the U.S. government raised the bounty on Maduro's head to $50 million. That was the offer to anyone who assisted the United States in any efforts to apprehend the Venezuelan leader. Now, it is perfectly possible that, given that we know the CIA was authorized to conduct covert action in Venezuela within the last 5 or 6 weeks, that what we're witnessing, what we're hearing about now, is the results of that covert U.S. plan, maybe, who knows, with assistance from figures within Maduro's inner circle. We know that there was an earlier plot, a 16-month covert effort to try and bribe one of Maduro's pilots to fly President Maduro out of Venezuela. That did not come to fruition, but it certainly indicates the kind of activities that the Trump administration has been contemplating and certainly had planned in the past to try and bring about regime change. But if it is confirmed, and at some point soon, I think, the Americans are going to have to provide some evidence, a photograph, anything to suggest that President Maduro is indeed in U.S. custody or the custody of allies who are willing to hand him over to the Americans. If it is confirmed that Maduro has been forced from power, this sends an absolutely seismic message throughout Latin America and indeed worldwide, that this president, who has styled himself as the peace president in the White House, is willing to unleash American force to create regime change where he wants to bring it about, and particularly, Hugo, in America's own backyard, given that the new American national security strategy echoes and amplifies the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, first promulgated by US President James Monroe, who claimed that Latin America and the Western Hemisphere was America's unique sphere of influence. In the last few hours, President Trump appears to have acted to bring that claim vividly to life.
Simon, that narrative you've just given us raises numerous questions. One of those is, how soon after Nicolas Maduro announced a state of emergency do we suspect that he was taken by the US forces? And secondly, under what legal authority, right, did the United States conduct strikes and seize a sitting head of state?
Well, I'm sorry to laugh, but there is no indication of any legal authority whatsoever. I mean, this is an attack by one sovereign nation on another sovereign nation. And there is going to be fury, I think, in the United States Congress if, as currently appears to be the case, there is no indication that the required consultation and notification was provided to Congress of this military assault. But this is a US administration, let's be absolutely clear, that in Venezuela at least has been shooting first and not even worrying about questions later. If you look at the maritime attacks that the United States has launched extrajudicially on more than 30 fast-moving speedboats and other vessels in the waters of the Caribbean, claiming, without providing a shred of evidence to support the claim, that those speedboats were all carrying narcotics from Venezuela to American shores, the Pentagon, or the Department of War, as President Trump now calls it, doesn't even attempt to justify those maritime attacks with reference to any kind of international law. They wave the question away. They don't even come up with any legal justification, and they will clearly struggle to come up with legal justification for this move. This move, if it is confirmed that President Maduro has been defenestrated, has been taken out of the picture, is perhaps even on his way to New York to make a court appearance, who knows? I mean, if that is what has actually happened in Venezuela, there are going to be enormous questions throughout the region, particularly in Cuba. Remember that the communist-governed island 90 miles off America's shores is entirely dependent on Venezuelan oil for its energy, oil that it has received in return basically for a barter series of arrangements. Cuban doctors have started going to Venezuela, playing a prominent role there. Cuban security teams have even become part of President Maduro's own security protection. And with regard to the state of emergency, I mean, President Maduro had indicated weeks ago that he was placing the country on a state of emergency, that he'd created a plan, he said, to protect critical Venezuelan infrastructure. The precise timeline of what happened here is unclear, but we know that this military action has come just days after, maybe 10 days or so, 2 weeks, after President Trump shifted his narrative. Originally, everything that he was doing against Venezuela was all about the war on drugs. Then he started articulating the claim that Venezuela had stolen American oil and he was determined to get it back. That's why we've seen Venezuelan sanctioned oil tankers being interdicted on the high seas, in one case pursued on the high seas by US military forces. And when he says they've stolen American oil, he appears to be talking about something that happened as long ago as 1976, long before Nicolas Maduro or his predecessor Hugo Chavez were in power in Venezuela. The nationalization of Venezuela's oil industry by the country's former leader, President Carlos Andrés Pérez, who was in power when Gerald Ford was in power in the White House. And there is some synchronicity here because much of the military campaign that was launched in the last few hours against Venezuela may have been launched from the USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, which President Trump parked basically in the region several weeks ago, presumably to make preparations for this military campaign.
Simon, my final question. Now, with the US having offered up to $50 million for information leading to Maduro's arrest or conviction, are officials indicating, or is there intelligence that suggests that there was driven by inside cooperation, defection, a pay tip, or was it purely a military execution based on information we have at hand?
I think there's a tremendous amount of speculation. There's no hard and fast information, Hugo, but it is reasonable to speculate, given the rapidity with which this military assault appears to have unfolded. And one has to presume that Nicolas Maduro was, surrounded by security guards. I mean, I think one has to at least speculate that it is possible that someone in his inner circle has turned against him. Not necessarily a requirement for this US military action to have succeeded, but if they have, within a matter of hours, at a stroke, taken Nicolas Maduro and his wife into custody. And let's underscore, the only information we have making that claim is coming from Donald Trump's social media feed. So we don't have yet hard and fast evidence to support that claim. But if they were able to do it this rapidly, it suggests that it is perfectly possible that someone may have a claim in Venezuela to that $50 million bounty. I just also want to make the point that I think this move also sends a seismic message to the rest of the world, that Donald Trump wants to aggrandize his position, if necessary, by using the American military. And at a time when he is making territorial threats towards Greenland, he's spoken about turning Gaza into American territory. He's been urging Canada to become America's 51st state. This action overnight in Venezuela demonstrates just how serious he is about being seen on the world stage as a strong man alongside Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping, carving up the world between them.
Simon Marks, our correspondent, joining us from London, giving us some insights into information that's appeared on Donald Trump's Truth Social, suggesting that Nicolas Maduro and his wife have indeed been captured by the United States forces